People think fire destroys fast. That's a lie we tell ourselves to sleep better. Real fire, the kind that lives underground, doesn't rush. It settles in. It learns the shape of the land, the sound of footsteps, the weight of regret. It burns slow, quiet, patient, like it knows time is on its side. Centralia has been burning for over 60 years, and it's still hungry. Daniel Harper arrived just before sunset, when the sky turns that dirty orange color that makes everything feel sick. He parked on the side of what used to be Route 61, tires crunching over broken asphalt and gravel sprayed with old graffiti. Names, dates, prayers, curses, layered on top of each other like the town had been screaming for decades and nobody bothered to listen. He killed the engine and sat there for a second, hands still on the steering wheel. The silence hit him first. Not peaceful silence. Not calm. The kind that feels deliberate, like something stopped talking. Because you showed up, Daniel stepped out of the car. Heat rolled up from the ground, subtle but unmistakable. The air smelled like sulfur and wet stone, sharp enough to sting the back of his throat. Steam curled out of cracks in the pavement. Thin white fingers reaching up and then disappearing. Jesus, Daniel muttered, this place is still alive. He wasn't supposed to stay long. 2 days, maybe 3. Shoot some footage. Grab a few interviews, bounce. That was the plan. The problem with plans is that Centralia doesn't give a damn about them. The town looked like a mouth with half its teeth knocked out. Empty lots where houses used to be. Power lines leading nowhere. A church standing alone like it refused to accept the memo that everything else was done. Daniel raised his camera and started filming. The ground vibrated under his boots. Not hard, just enough to notice. Like a pulse. He laughed it off. Probably trucks, he said to nobody. Or my imagination. That was his second mistake. He followed the cracked road deeper into town, boots kicking up ash and dust. Smoke drifted lazily across his path, never thick enough to block his vision, always thick enough to make him uneasy. It moved wrong, not with the wind, more like it was choosing where to go. That's when he saw the house, one of the last ones still standing. 2 stories, sagging porch, windows blacked out like blind eyes. Steam rose from the yard in slow, steady waves. Someone was sitting on the porch, an old man, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground like he was listening to it talk. Cold dust stained his jeans. His skin looked permanently gray, like the town had soaked into him. You shouldn't stand there, the man said without looking up. Daniel jumped. Didn't hear you. The old man smirked. Nobody ever does. Daniel introduced himself. The man said his name was Frank. Just Frank. No last name. Didn't need one anymore. You here to film the fire? Frank asked, something like that. Frank nodded slowly. Fire ain't the problem. What is? Frank finally looked up. His eyes were sharp. Too sharp. The fire's just what keeps it awake. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine, even though sweat was already soaking his shirt. You live here alone? Daniel asked. Frank chuckled. Alone's a funny word in this town. That night, Daniel didn't leave. He told himself it was for the footage, for the story, for authenticity. He parked near Frank's house and slept in his car. Windows cracked despite the cold because the heat from the ground was unreal. At 3:17 a.m., he woke up choking. Smoke filled the car. Thin but aggressive. His chest burned as he shoved the door open and stumbled out, coughing, eyes watering. The ground beneath his feet was hot, too hot, and from somewhere below, deep beneath the earth, Daniel heard it clearly for the first time. Breathing, slow, heavy, endless, like the town was alive. And aware. By morning, the smoke was gone. Daniel stepped out of the car expecting the air to still burn his lungs, but instead it felt weirdly normal, cold, almost clean. Too clean, like the town had scrubbed itself overnight. Frank's porch was empty. Daniel walked up anyway. The wood creaked under his boots, loud enough to feel disrespectful. He knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house smelled like old coal and burned paper. Not fresh smoke, ancient smoke. The kind that never really leaves. The furniture was sparse. A couch with torn arms. A table with one chair. No photos, no decorations. Like the place wasn't meant for living, just waiting. Daniel noticed the floor first. Cracks ran to the boards, thin but deep, and warm air pushed up through them in slow pulses. The house was breathing too. "Frank," Daniel called out. A voice answered, but not from upstairs, not from another room, from below. "Down here." Daniel froze. There was a door in the floor, a cellar entrance, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It was already open. Heat poured out like an open oven. "You don't want to come down," Frank said calmly. Daniel swallowed. "Then why are you down there?" A pause, long enough to make Daniel's skin crawl. "Because it remembers me." Against every rational thought, Daniel grabbed his camera and stepped closer. The stairs were old concrete, damp, glowing faintly red along the edges. Not fire, just heat, deep and constant. Frank stood at the bottom, shirt off, skin glistening with sweat. Coal dust covered his chest like war paint. "Most people think the fire's the curse," Frank said. "Truth is, the fire's just a lock." "The lock on what?" Daniel asked. Frank smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "On everything we buried." Frank explained it the way locals always do, casual, half-joking, like telling a bar story. How the fire started in '62. Trash pit lit up. Coal seam caught. Nobody thought much of it. Fires happened. Fires went out. This one didn't. It spread under the town, through the mines, through forgotten tunnels dug by men who never planned for consequences. Houses filled with carbon monoxide. Roads collapsed. Kids got sick. People died in their sleep. The government came, studied it, labeled it uncontrollable, wrote checks, told people to leave. Most did. Some didn't. Why stay? Daniel asked. Frank looked at the glowing walls. Because when the fire woke up, it started talking. Daniel laughed, then stopped when Frank didn't. At first it was whispers, Frank said. Names, regrets, things you never told anyone. Then it got louder. The ground trembled, just a little. Daniel's camera shut off by itself. That's when Frank grabbed Daniel's arm. His grip was strong. Too strong for a man his age. You hear that, don't you? Frank whispered. Daniel listened. Deep underground, beneath layers of burning coal and collapsed tunnels, something shifted. Not fire, not rock, movement. That night, Daniel dreamed of tunnels. Endless black veins stretching under the town, lined with burned handprints. Faces pressed into stone, mouths open, screaming without sound. The ground above them pulsed like a heartbeat. He woke up screaming. Frank was standing over him. You dreaming of them already? Frank asked softly. Daniel nodded, shaking. Frank leaned in close. Then it's too late. It knows you now. By day 3, Daniel noticed something worse. His footprints didn't fade. Ash settled everywhere, but wherever he walked, the ground stayed bare, like the town was memorizing him. He tried to leave. The GPS glitched. The road signs were gone. Route 61 looped back on itself, no matter which direction he drove. At sunset, the smoke returned, thick, rolling, alive, and from the cracks in the earth, voices started calling his name, not yelling, inviting. By the 4th day, Daniel stopped checking the time. His phone said it was Tuesday, then Wednesday, then Tuesday again. The battery never dropped below 80%, even though there was no signal, and he hadn't charged it once. Centralia ran on its own rules. Frank was waiting for him near the old church, sitting on a cracked stone bench like he'd been there all night. You ever notice how quiet it gets before a cave collapses? Frank asked. I've never been in a cave, Daniel said. Frank nodded. Lucky you. The church doors were chained shut, but the ground beneath them smoked harder than anywhere else in town. Heat shimmered in the air, warping the cross above the entrance like it was melting. People think this place was abandoned because of the fire, Frank said. Truth is, folks started leaving when the dead wouldn't stay put. Daniel frowned. You're saying people came back? Not exactly. Frank pointed to the cemetery behind the church. Most of the graves were empty. Headstones leaned at odd angles, names scratched out, dates left unfinished. They didn't rise, Frank said. They sank. Daniel followed him toward the cemetery. The ground was soft, spongy, like stepping on a mattress. Each footstep released a hiss of hot air, along with a smell so foul Daniel gagged. "What the hell is that?" Daniel asked. "Rotting coal," Frank said. "Same thing, down here." Frank told him about the missing, not the evacuated ones, not the people who moved away and never looked back, the ones who stayed too long, the ones who woke up coughing and stepped outside, thinking the air might be better. Sometimes the ground just opened, no screaming, no collapse, just a slow, silent sinking, like the earth was tired of holding them up. "They fall into the fire?" Daniel asked. Frank shook his head. "Fire's just a hallway." They stood near a grave with no name, just a number carved into stone. "What's down there?" Daniel asked. Frank's voice dropped. Everything that didn't want to leave. That night, Daniel finally reviewed his footage. Most of it was corrupted, faces blurred, audio warped, smoke moving against the wind. But one clip froze him in place. It was from the first night, at 3:17 a.m. The camera caught steam rising from the ground, and something standing inside it. Tall, thin, its shape flickered like heat distortion, but its eyes were solid, bright, watching. Behind Daniel, he scrubbed through the frame again and again. The thing never moved. It didn't need to. Frank knocked on the car window. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked. Daniel rolled the window down, hands shaking. "What is that thing?" Frank didn't answer right away. He sat on the hood, staring at the smoking ground. "They ain't monsters," Frank finally said. "They're what's left after the town takes its share." Daniel demanded the truth. Frank told him about the mines, how miners used to hear knocks from seal tunnels, how some men claimed the earth spoke in their wives' voices, their kids' voices, begging them to dig deeper. "They dug," Frank said, "always dug." One mine collapsed in the 40s. Officially, no survivors. Unofficially, voices kept coming from below for weeks. When the fire started years later, those tunnels burned first. "Fire eats oxygen," Frank said, "but it don't kill everything." Daniel felt sick. "You're saying people are still alive down there?" Frank shook his head slowly. Alive's the wrong word. The ground rumbled beneath them, stronger this time. A crack split open near Daniel's feet, glowing red, then sealing shut like a wound. "That's it, listening," Frank whispered. Daniel packed his gear that night. He didn't tell Frank. He didn't say goodbye. He just got in the car and drove, pedaled to the floor, smoke closing in behind him. The road bent. The trees leaned inward. And up ahead, standing calmly in the middle of Route 61, was Frank. Daniel slammed the brakes. Frank didn't move. "You don't leave Centralia," Frank said, voice flat. "You either burn out or sink in." Behind Frank, the road cracked open, and something began to rise. Daniel didn't scream. That's what surprised him later, when he tried to remember this moment. The way the ground split open in front of him, asphalt tearing apart like wet cardboard. The way heat blasted his face, so hard it felt like his skin might peel off. The way something massive shifted beneath the road. Still no scream. Frank stood perfectly still, hands in his pockets, like this was just another quiet night in town. "You see it now," Frank said. "Told you the fire was just the hallway." The crack widened. Red light pulsed from below, not steady like flames, but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The air filled with a low vibration that Daniel felt in his teeth more than his ears. Something moved up through the gap. Not fast, not violent. Patient, a shape emerged, half hidden by steam and smoke. Tall, stretched wrong, like it had forgotten the correct proportions for a human body. Its surface wasn't skin. It looked like burned coal fused with muscle, cracked and glowing faintly from the inside. Its head tilted. Daniel realized, with a cold jolt of terror, that it was sniffing. "Don't run," Frank said calmly. "They hate that." Daniel whispered. "They?" The thing lifted one long arm out of the crack. Fingers too many, joints bending the wrong direction. When it touched the road, the asphalt smoked. "That's what happens when people stay too long," Frank said. "Town strips you down, keeps what it likes." The thing's eyes locked onto Daniel. And then Frank stepped aside. "Go on," Frank said. "It already knows your name." Daniel ran. This time, instinct took over. He bolted back toward the trees, lungs burning, boots slamming against a cracked road. Behind him, the ground groaned, like the town was shifting its weight. He didn't look back. That was his third mistake. Something brushed past him. Not grabbed, brushed, like a hand testing the heat of a stove before committing. Daniel stumbled and rolled into the dirt, camera skidding away. When he looked up, the thing was gone. So was Frank. The crack in the road had sealed shut, leaving behind nothing but warped asphalt and steam. Daniel lay there shaking, trying to convince himself he'd imagined it. Heat hallucination, stress, sleep deprivation, anything but the truth. Then the voices started again. This time, they weren't whispers. They came from everywhere. From the ground, from the trees, from the empty houses around him. Men, women, children, overlapping, talking over each other. Some crying, some laughing, some begging, and some angry. Daniel. He froze. The voice was close, right behind him. It sounded like his mother. That night, he took shelter in the church. The chains on the door were gone. Inside, the pews were burned black, warped like they'd been exposed to extreme heat. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on him. He sat against the altar, clutching his camera like a lifeline. That's when he noticed the floor. Footprints, fresh ones, leading beneath the altar. Daniel followed them. The basement stairs were steeper than they should have been, deeper. Each step down made the air hotter, the walls glowing faintly red. Symbols were carved into the stone, old mining marks mixed with things that looked nothing like human writing. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber, and it was full of people, or what used to be people. They stood motionless, half fused into the walls. Faces burned smooth, eyes glowing dimly like dying embers. Their mouths opened and closed in slow unison, breathing with the fire. At the center of it all stood Frank. "You stayed," Frank said, smiling. "What is this place?" Daniel whispered. Frank spread his arms. "This is what Centralia saves." Daniel backed away. "You said the town remembers people." Frank nodded. "And people remember the town." The ground beneath Daniel's feet softened. Heat surged up his legs. Frank's smile widened. "You don't leave stories like this untold." The floor gave way, and Daniel fell. The fall didn't kill Daniel. That was the first cruel surprise. He hit something soft. Ash, soot, layers of burned fabric and bone mashed together like the earth had been collecting leftovers for decades. The impact knocked the breath out of him, but the heat was worse. It crawled over his skin, soaked into his clothes, pressed into his lungs with every inhale. He tried to scream. The sound barely made out his throat. The chamber stretched farther than it should have. A massive underground cathedral carved by fire and collapse, supported by blackened pillars that pulsed faintly red. The walls weren't solid rock anymore. They moved, slowly, subtly, like muscle flexing beneath skin. Daniel forced himself up. Figures surrounded him. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some stood upright. Others were fused halfway into the walls or floor, torsos exposed, legs gone. Their faces were wrong. Features melted smooth, mouths permanently open like they were caught mid-confession. Eyes glowed dimly, not dead, not alive. Aware. "You feel it yet?" Frank's voice echoed. Frank stepped out from behind a pillar, unharmed, untouched by the heat. He looked younger down here, straighter, stronger, like the fire had burned the years off him. "What did you do to me?" Daniel rasped. Frank shook his head. "Didn't do anything. Town did. I just listened." Daniel staggered backward. The ground beneath his feet shifted, gripping his boots like wet clay. "They were miners," Frank said, gesturing to the figures. "Then they were residents. Then they were stories nobody wanted to remember." One of the figures turned its head. Slow, painfully slow. Its mouth opened wider than humanly possible, and when it spoke, dozens of voices poured out at once. "Stay." Daniel clutched his head. "They're alive." Frank smiled softly. "They're preserved." Frank finally told him the truth. The fire wasn't an accident. Back before the evacuation orders, before the news trucks and government checks, the town council knew the fire couldn't be stopped. But they also discovered something else, something the miners had whispered about for generations. The coal seams weren't empty. They ran through a pocket beneath Centralia, where the earth behaved wrong. Heat didn't just burn there. It changed things. It absorbed pain, memory, guilt, and gave something back. They made a deal, Frank said. Let the fire burn. Let the town shrink. In exchange, Centralia wouldn't die. Daniel laughed hysterically. This is insane. Frank crouched down in front of him. You walked the roads. You breathed the smoke. You heard the voices. Don't insult it by pretending it's not real. The figures around them began to move. Not walking, rising. Ash fell from the ceiling like snow. The chamber vibrated harder now. The pulse quicker, hungrier. What happened to me? Daniel asked. Frank stood. You tell the story. Daniel shook his head. You said nobody leaves. Frank's eyes glowed faintly red. Some do, but not the way they came. The ground beneath Daniel's hands burned. Skin blistered. Pain exploded through his arms as the ash hardened, bonding to him. He screamed this time. The figures reached for him, not to grab, but to touch. Each contact sent flashes through his mind. Memories that weren't his. Families evacuating. Kids, coughing blood. Men screaming underground as tunnels collapsed. The fire listening, learning. Daniel felt himself sinking. The walls leaned inward. Then, silence. Cold air rushed in. A siren wailed. Lights flashed. Daniel woke up on a stretcher, coughing violently, lungs filled with ash and smoke. Firefighters shouted over each other. Someone slapped an oxygen mask over his face. Another squatter, one of them said. Must have passed out from fumes, another replied. Daniel tried to sit up. Frank, he croaked. The church underground. They ignored him. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Daniel looked back. The church stood untouched. No smoke, no cracks, no Frank. At the hospital, doctors call it exposure-induced psychosis, carbon monoxide poisoning, trauma. They released him 2 days later. His footage? Gone. Every file corrupted, except one. A single video recorded at 3:17 a.m. It showed Daniel standing in the chamber, and behind him, Frank, smiling, with eyes glowing like fire. Daniel never really left Centralia. That was a thought that kept him awake at night, long after the hospital smell faded from his clothes and the burns on his hands healed into pale, twisted scars. He went home. Sure, different state, different bed, different walls. But the ground still felt warm under his feet, even on cold tile, even in the middle of winter. At 3:17 a.m. every single night, he woke up. No alarm, no nightmare he could remember, just a sudden jolt of awareness, like someone had flipped a switch inside his head. And every time he smelled coal smoke, the doctors called it trauma, said his brain was stuck in fight or flight mode. They gave him pills that made his thoughts float and his hands shake. None of it stopped the breathing, because it wasn't in his head, it was under it. Daniel started hearing the voices again a week after he got home. Not loud, not demanding, casual, like people chatting in the next room. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they said his name like it was an inside joke. He tried to drown them out with TV, music, anything. Didn't matter. They always slipped through in the quiet moments. One night, he opened his laptop. The corrupted file was still there. He hit play. This time, the footage didn't glitch. It showed the underground chamber in full clarity. The figures, the pulsing walls. Daniel standing at the center, shaking, eyes wild. Then the camera panned on its own, toward Frank. You're doing great, Frank said from inside the video. Told you the town remembers. Daniel slammed the laptop shut. His phone buzzed immediately. Unknown number. One text. You left something behind. His scars burned. 2 days later, Daniel drove back to Pennsylvania. He told himself it was closure. Proof. A final check. So he could finally let it go. Centralia welcomed him like an old habit. The smoke was thicker this time. The heat stronger. Houses that stood before were gone now, collapsed into blackened pits. The church was half sunken, its steeple tilted like it was bowing. Frank sat on the porch again. Same place, same posture. "You took your time," Frank said. "Daniel didn't get out of the car. You said some people leave." Frank nodded. "And some come back." "What are you?" Daniel asked. Frank smiled. "I'm what happens when you listen long enough." Frank had been a miner once, long before the fire, long before the evacuation. He'd been trapped underground during collapse, pinned in the dark, breathing dust, listening to the earth groan for days. When the rescue teams gave up, the town didn't. Something beneath Centralia answered him. When the fire started years later, it found Frank still down there, alive in ways that shouldn't have been possible, fused with heat and stone and memory. The town didn't burn him. It kept him. He's not the caretaker. A voice whispered from the ground. He's the door. The earth split open behind Frank, slow and familiar. "You were never meant to stay," Frank said gently. "You were meant to carry it." Daniel felt it then, the weight in his chest, the heat in his lungs, the memories that weren't his but lived inside him anyway. Every story needs a witness. Centralia doesn't want silence. It wants to be remembered. "You upload the footage," Frank said. "You tell them what you saw, and the town keeps breathing." "And if I don't?" Daniel asked. The ground opened wider. "Then it comes looking." Daniel understood. He turned the car around. As he drove away, smoke followed him. Not rolling, not chasing, just drifting along behind, patient as always. That night, Daniel uploaded the video. It went viral. Millions watched. Some said it was fake. Some said it was brilliant horror. Some swore they could hear breathing if they turned the volume up. 3 days later, the underground fire in Centralia flared for the first time in years. And somewhere beneath the town, something smiled, because now it had an audience. Fame didn't feel like victory. Daniel learned that fast. The comments never stopped. Conspiracy threads, reaction videos, people slowing the footage frame by frame, circling shadows, arguing about whether the breathing was sound design or something else. Podcasts called him a genius. Skeptics called him a fraud. A few locals called him worse. And then there were the emails. Not hate mail, not fan mail. Warnings. They came from burner accounts with no names, no photos, no signatures. Short messages. Always polite. Always specific. Stop posting. The ground is warmer now. You're not the only one who hears it. Daniel stopped sleeping entirely. At 3:17 a.m., the voices didn't just wake him anymore. They talked to each other through him. He'd catch himself mouthing words he didn't recognize, sentences shaped like mine shafts and fire and old regrets. His apartment floor stayed warm, no matter how high he cranked the AC. The scars on his hands darkened. Sometimes, when he pressed his palms to the wall, he swore he felt it pulse back. The news broke quietly. A spike in ground temperatures near abandoned coal towns across the country. Small ones, forgettable ones, places nobody paid attention to anymore. The experts blamed shifting seams. Old fires reactivating. Climate weirdness. Daniel knew better. Centralia wasn't spreading. It was being remembered. Frank appeared in the footage again a week later. Not added, not edited. Just there. Daniel hadn't uploaded anything new. But viewers started pointing it out. A reflection in a black screen. A silhouette behind Daniel during a live stream. A calm, familiar voice buried under the audio hiss. "You gave a mouth," Frank said during one stream. Clear as day, Daniel slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding. His phone buzzed. "Proud of you." That night, the floor cracked. Not wide, just enough. Heat poured up through the split, gentle and intimate, like a hand on his back. The voices quieted, all at once, like they were waiting. Daniel knelt. For the first time since Centralia, he didn't feel afraid. He understood now. The fire never wanted destruction. Destruction was sloppy, wasteful. It wanted witnesses. Places burn. Towns disappear. People forget. But stories travel. They sink into new ground, light new seams. They make new doors. Daniel went live one last time. No effects, no music, just him, sitting on the floor, palms resting over crack, eyes glassy but steady. I didn't survive Centralia, he said. I was selected. The breathing grew louder. If you're hearing this, he continued, it's already too late to pretend it's just a story. The ground beneath him opened silently, not violently, like it had been waiting. The live stream didn't cut. Viewers watched as Daniel slowly sank, the heat blooming around him, smoke curling up at a curtain closing. His face never showed pain, only relief. Right before he disappeared, he smiled, and somewhere beneath the feed, beneath the comments and the screaming and the sudden silence, someone breathed. The video ended at 3:17 a.m. Centralia is still burning, and now so are the stories.